AP Computer Science Principles. This is a continuation of the Programming Review Units 4 and 5. This particular one is Lesson 2, and it relates more to Unit 4. As a recap, what do the following expressions evaluate to? Well, first you have 2 times 10 evaluates to 20. Then 5 plus 15 evaluates to 20. Finally, the computer asks, is 20 greater than 20? And that answer is false. Go ahead and quickly think about the other 2, then pause the video, answer the other 2, and then continue. 6 less than 10, that is true. 5 equals 5, that is true. True and true is true. Does 5 equal 3? That's false. Followed by an or. So that means I have to try the next one. 17 greater than 10? That's true. False or true is true. Conditionals. This is a type of selection algorithm where certain statements will only run under certain conditions. If statements, these exist so that your program can adapt, respond, or make choices about whether or not to execute certain portions of code based on some condition that you check while the program is executing. Because it involves checking conditions, these statements are sometimes called conditional statements. An if statement uses a Boolean, relational operator, or some combination of them to decide whether or not to execute a certain portion of code. Selection. Here we have an if statement. The code in the block of statements is executed if the Boolean expression is true. No action is taken if the condition evaluates to false. So in your pseudocode that you'll see on your exam, if followed by a condition and a block of codes, notice the starting and ending curly brace. Or in block mode, this is what it looks like. Notice that the block of statements is within the bigger block containing the condition. The if condition, this is in Python. In JavaScript, you'll see if, and then in parentheses, you'll see the condition. So very, very similar. In Python, as well as JavaScript, in Python, white space is very important. After you condition, you need your colon. On the next line, each statement that is in your block of statements must be tabbed over. If it is not tabbed, it will not be in your if statement. That's Python. JavaScript is not like that. In JavaScript, it's very much like the pseudocode over here. If your condition, by the way, the if, we'll do it here. Whoops, we'll do this. We'll do if, and then we have some condition, and then you've got your open curly brace followed by your closing curly brace. This would be JavaScript. And in JavaScript, just like in Java, white space doesn't matter a hill of beans. Now here are a couple of examples. And the Python, you may see Python, but remember that it's just showing you the difference between a programming language with the colons and all the syntax and the pseudocode. It all looks very much the same, and you should be able to figure out pretty much what's going on either way. On the left, we have x receives the value of 3. Y receives the value of 4. If x is less than y, 3 is less than 4, then we will display x is less than y. If this had been turned around, it would simply check the condition. If it was false, it would see the opening curly brace and jump down to the next executable line after the closing curly brace. Over here, x is set to 10, y is set to 10. If x equals y, this is asking the question, are they equal? Then it will print x and y are equal. They are in fact equal, so it prints. And again, if it was not true, it would skip to the next executable line after the block in the if. Here are 2 more. Pause the video and try these 2 examples. Here, you got A received the value of 10 mod 3. 10 divided by 3 is 3, remainder 1. B is A minus 2. This would mean that it's 1 minus 2, which then means negative 1 is stored in B. So if A, which is 1, is less than B, negative 1, you'll wind up with A being B plus 9. That would be negative 1 plus 9, and you would have 8. And then you would display the 8. Are you going to display the 8? No, nothing is displayed. This evaluated to false. Because it's false, nothing inside this block of code was executed. Let's look over here. X receives the value of 3. Y receives the value of 4. If 3 is less than 4, that's true. And 3 mod 3 is equal to 0. That's true. So we have true and true is true. Display X is less than Y. Display X is divisible by 3. Both of those are true. So both of those statements will be executed. They are within the block of code. If-else statement. The code in the first block of statements is executed if the Boolean expression condition evaluates to true. Otherwise, the code in the second block of statements is executed. So you can think you're going to do one of two things. So here, pseudocode, if condition, first block, else, second condition. This evaluates if the condition is true. This evaluates if the condition is false. Here's what it looks like in block statement. If condition is true, this executes, else, that means that the condition was false, we execute this. In Python, if you're using Python, remember that each statement in your block has to be indented. There's no condition for the else statement block. Also in JavaScript, you would have if, and then your condition, your opening curly brace, and your closing curly brace, and then you would have your else statement. And again, your else statement would have its opening curly brace and its closing curly brace with the code that you want executed in between. Here are some examples to try. Pause the video and see if you get them right. All right, let's take a look at this one. X is set to 3. Y is set to 4. If Y mod 2 is 0. If Y is divisible by 2, then we're going to say that Y is even, else Y is odd. Notice, we don't need to worry about what X is equal to. In this case, Y is divisible by 2, so we're going to display Y as an even number. X is set to 10, Y is set to 10. If X plus 2, that evaluates to 12, is greater than 20, that is false. So this first block will not execute. The second block, the else block, will execute. Two more examples. Try these. Pause your video. Okay. A gets 7. Oops, let's do this. A gets, if we come over here and we're tracing this, we've got A and we've got B. So A is equal to 7. B is 7 minus 2, which is 5. If 7 is less than 5, that's false. Or B equals 5, that's true. So this whole thing is true. So we're going to evaluate, or we're going to execute this block. A receives the value of B times 2. So 5 times 2 is 10, and that gets stored in A. And then we're going to display A. So we should display 10. Let's take a look at the second one to see how you did. W and H. First, W gets the value 200. H gets the value 15. If W mod H, okay, so that would be 200 divided by 15 if the remainder is 0. So that's just asking you if 200 is divisible by 15. If you're not sure, well, simply use a calculator, okay, or do it longhand. Either way, you find out that 200 is not divisible by 15. There is a remainder, okay? So that means that this is false. So you wind up executing this statement. W is set to H, which is 15. So that's going to be 30 plus 200. So this will now be 230. And then you're going to print W. But notice, I don't care that that's W because I have these guys, which means it's going to print W. Up here, notice the W is not in double quotes, so I would have printed 230 for the if the condition had been true. Now, if, else, if statements. Let's see if I can get this here. This statement is not on the AP CSP exam. It is on the AP CSA exam, but on the principal's exam, it's not. It is, however, a common selection statement that goes along with the other two, and it's used often if you have multiple conditions that you want to check. It's also an important thing to learn and know, and it's just an extension. It is there are items that are part of the course that you need to learn, and then there are items that are part of the subset that will be tested. Okay? The one thing you need to know is because it is not on the AP exam, there is no pseudocode for it. So here you have if grade greater than or equal to 90, you output A. Else if grade is greater than or equal to 80, B. Else if 70. Remember, this is the one where we talked about it is important, okay? It's important to check the most restrictive first. So in this case, I want grade greater than or equal to 90. If I wanted to output F's first, okay, I would need to say if, and then I would have my grade is less than 60. I would output an F. Then I would work in reverse order. The order is important when you're working through your if, else, if statements, especially for something like this. Now, in this example, the first condition is checked. If it is true, it executes that block of statements and then skips all the conditions that start with else if. I don't know why it's else if, and else. The if statement, if the if statement is false, it will skip that block and move to the first else if statement. If that statement is true, it will run that block and skip the rest. If that is false, it will move on to the next else if, and so on. There is no limit to how many else if statements you can have. Note that if you have multiple if statements, every if statement is checked. So there's a difference. This speeds things up. So grade equals input. Please enter your grade, which would mean your average. If grade greater than or equal to 90, you print the A. If grade greater than or equal to 80, you print the B. Well, if you enter a 95, you are going to print this, B, C, D. The only thing you're not going to get is F. Why? Because these are all if statements, not else if statements. This would not work as intended. It starts with an if. Every condition is an if. Because every condition is an if, every condition will be checked. Here you would want an else if. Why will this code not work as intended? Pause the video, see if you can figure it out. this would not work because the conditions that are checked are not in an order that will promote logic. If a student got a 95 as the grade, then 95 is greater than or equal to 0, and so they'll get an F. And none of these others will even be checked. Next, you'll have Lesson 3, Iteration.